Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the webinar, Medicaid Eligibility 101. I'm Dana Casserly with the Pennsylvania Health Law Project, and joining me on your screen today are your two presenters for our session, Janice Minor and Catherine Ahrens, both paralegals with the Pennsylvania Health Law Project. Today's session is the second in a series of webinars we're hosting this spring on Medicaid and the public health emergency Unwinding. Throughout the series, we'll provide practical tips and information to help you or your clients or your patients maintain Medicaid coverage after the pandemic ends, once the COVID era rules are no longer in place. At the end of the presentation today, we will share the upcoming scheduled trainings that we have in the session, and we'll have the registration links for them too. We have 3 more webinars in the series, and those links will be in the slides that we circulate after the session as well. So just a bit of housekeeping before we get started with our presentation. If you have questions for our presenters today, please type them into the Q&A box in your Zoom control panel. We are going to stop periodically during the presentation for questions, so I'll read them aloud to our presenters, and we'll do our best to get to as many questions as we can today while being respectful of the 11:30 stop time. If you have any technical difficulties during the webinar, please first try signing off and signing back into the webinar. If that doesn't resolve it or you still need help, please email event@phlp.org. That's event@phlp.org. I will also put that email in the chat for you. The presentation today is being recorded, and a copy of the recording, the slides, and the handout will be sent around after the webinar. Closed captioning is available for today's session. To see the closed captions on your screen, you have to click the 3 dots in your webinar control panel and then click Show Subtitles. If you're seeing the subtitles and you want to disable them, click the 3 dots again and then click Hide Subtitles. So with that, I will turn things over to Catherine, who will get us started today.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Catherine. I'm a paralegal with the Pennsylvania Health Law Project. And as Dana said, we'll be discussing Medicaid Eligibility 101 today. Before we do that, though, we'll get into a little bit about what PHLP does. So Janice, could you go to the next slide? So just a little bit about PHLP before we start. We're a statewide nonprofit legal aid dedicated to ensuring access to public health coverage and services. We have a helpline. We have consumer and community education. So we provide trainings, webinars such as this one, systemic advocacy, and we also have a monthly newsletter that I encourage everyone join so that they can stay up to date with current happenings. Next slide, please, Janice. How can we help? We can answer Medicaid eligibility questions, screen individuals for benefits, advise or help troubleshoot certain eligibility problems, including denials and representation at appeals. We do advise and help with problems getting healthcare services or medications and managed care plans, or generally fee-for-service. And we advise or help when someone's denied medication or service, and can also include representation at appeals. And we encourage individuals to reach out to our helpline if they are having any of these problems. So today we'll talk a little bit about Medicaid eligibility basics. We'll talk about medical assistance for workers with disabilities, tips and tricks for renewing benefits, and we'll also point you to other webinars that we're holding in this series. Next slide. Thank you. So just generally, Medicaid basics, also called medical assistance in Pennsylvania, run by the Department of Human Services, DHS, and has funding from CMS and DHS. Medicaid is health insurance for people with limited incomes, and they're categorized into certain groups. It can be someone's only form of insurance, or it can be their secondary insurance, and most Medicaid categories work with Medicare, as well as employer coverage. And some basics to keep in mind when someone is being reviewed for eligibility: they need to meet citizenship, immigration status requirements. They must be a resident of Pennsylvania. They have to fit into a covered group or category, And very important, they have to meet income and resource guidelines. Some different eligibility groups and categories that we'll discuss today. It's important to note that Medicaid is not just one huge category. And if people don't fall into this one huge category, they won't qualify. There are tons of different categories in Medicaid, and we'll talk about those today as well. As you'll see, there's Medicaid for individuals who are 65 and over, seniors, those who have disabilities and continue to work, children, pregnant women, individuals who require long-term care services and support. So Medicaid has a ton of different categories and options for individuals. And when someone is applying for Medicaid, there's a 4-step analysis done for each person. The first is, what category does that person fit into? So as I just mentioned, are they seniors? Are they disabled? Are they working? Do they require long-term care? Figuring out what category someone fits into. The second is, what is their household size? The third is, the person under the income limit for that category and household size, and is the person under any applicable resource limit. So in each category of Medicaid, income limits are different. There are different rules for how income is counted, whose income is counted, what type of income is counted, and we'll go over that today, as well as resource limits do apply to most Medicaid categories, as we'll talk about. In the expansion category, there is no resource limit, but not all resources count, and some categories don't count resources if there are minor children who live in those households. And I'll pause briefly if anybody has any questions just about these basics.
Thanks, Catherine.
Yes.
I'm just going through the questions. Okay, we don't have any questions right now. Sorry about that.
Okay, that's okay. Okay, so we will start then. We will talk about Medicaid eligibility for adults, children, and pregnant women. And before I start, hopefully folks tuned into the previous webinar that was done by our colleague Amy, talking about the end of continuous coverage, which will end on April 1st. So we're going to just talk about general eligibility. If you have questions about, retroactive eligibility or the end of continuous coverage, please find that. Hopefully when you registered, you got that training. So please refer to that for those questions. But today we'll start with Medicaid eligibility for adults, children, and pregnant women. This is categories with MAGI, income, household counting rules. So the MAGI household size has 3 sets of rules. It's based on tax filing status. So there's the tax filer, tax dependent, and non-filers. And MAGI is the modified adjusted gross income category and is based off of tax filing rules. So some income examples of what is counted for MAGI: wages and tips, unemployment compensation, Social Security benefits, pensions, dividends and interest, child's income, if they're filing taxes. And not counted, you have child support, workers' compensation, veterans benefits, some scholarship income, gifts and inheritances as not counted. So Medicaid for adults without Medicare, that's very key, is for adults ages 19 to 64. They need to be under the income, under 138% of the federal poverty level. Resources are not counted for this category. They just cannot also qualify for Medicare. So this is only Medicaid category where someone cannot also have Medicare and qualify for MAGI. As you'll see, for a household of one person, one tax filer, in 2023, 1,677.
Caroline, sorry, Catherine, I'm just going to jump in. We do have a few questions that just came in. I think that
sure,
they might be relevant. It may have been right when I paused for them. So
sure.
just before you go on, I'll ask these. Can you talk about how the state defines residence, being a state resident?
Yes, they need to live in the state of Pennsylvania with an address. There are a few caveats for students who are living in other states during that time. But generally speaking, they need to live in the state of Pennsylvania and have an address here. And all this information as well is in the Medical Assistance Eligibility Handbook, which can be found online. But again, if you have individuals with more specific questions, please always reach out to our helpline.
And Catherine, I guess I would just add that, somebody has to be in Pennsylvania with the intent to stay here. But beyond that, there's no time frame. Like you don't have to show I've been here 30 days or 60 days or any amount of time. It's just, I'm not here visiting a relative kind of thing. I'm here with the intent to stay here.
Yes, thank you, Janice.
Thank you both. I also just put a link to the Medical Assistance Eligibility Handbook in the chat, so folks can review that. And there is a section on residents in the state of Pennsylvania. So if you just click on that section, you can read all the rules that Catherine and Janice are talking about. Okay, and we got two people have the same question here, so I want to read this one out loud. When did the new federal poverty guidelines start for Medicaid, and should it be retroactive back to January 1st?
So the new federal poverty level guidelines should take effect 1 month after they're created. So the county should have started applying those in March. So if you had someone terminated before March, based off of the 2023 federal poverty level, that should not have happened. So I guess to answer the retroactive piece, it should not have happened in the first place. So retroactively, they should have kept their Medicaid. If you have someone who experienced that, I would advise reaching out to our helpline so that we can help kind of work through that. But generally speaking, they take effect 1 month after their release. So that should have been in March.
Thank you, Catherine. And I put the helpline number in the chat as well. Two other, I think, quick questions. Is unemployment income considered differently than wages?
No, it's income that's counted.
And is the income shown gross or net?
Gross.
Okay. All right. Thanks. I will come back to any other questions as you pause the next time. Thank you.
Sure.
And Catherine, I guess in terms of Deanna, the question around, difference between how wages might be counted versus, say, unemployment. Catherine's answer was correct as far as we've gotten in the training, as far as, the MAGI categories. And then we're going to talk later about other categories and how income is counted different. So kind of hold that thought. And if that question gets re-asked later, we're going to have a different answer.
Yeah. I think also important to note for some of these questions is that these are all, it is very much an individual case-by-case basis for Medicaid eligibility. So keep that in mind as we go through this webinar.
Right. And the categories matter, which is in part why we've separated the training, as we have, talking about these MAGI, the modified adjusted gross income categories, kids, pregnant women, adults without Medicaid, and how their income counts differently than for other categories that we're going to review shortly. So it's complicated. It's very confusing.
So as you'll see here, income limits for 2023 for infants and pregnant women, 220% of the federal poverty level. The 2 is start just because you always count the income of the mother and the unborn child or children if there are multiple. And then income limits for children ages 1 to 5 and 6 to 18. 1 to 5 is 162% of the federal poverty level, and 6 to 18 is 138%. of the federal poverty level. And now we'll talk a little bit about Medicaid for kids with special health needs or disabilities, which is often referred to as PH95, sometimes the loophole. So kids that are in households over income for Medicaid can still be eligible based on health conditions or disability. They need to provide documentation of a child's health condition. The county will generally first review them for other Medicaid categories based off of income and household size. But for PH95, household income is not counted in determining Medicaid eligibility for a child with a disability. And the child is required to apply for Social Security with this category, but they're not required to be granted Social Security to be eligible. Any questions before we?
No further questions right now. Thank you, Catherine.
Okay. Thanks. Okay, and now we'll talk a little bit about Medicaid eligibility for older adults, adults with disabilities, or breast and cervical cancer. So these are all of the non-MAGI categories. So everything I've previously discussed changes a lot with these categories. And we'll talk a little bit about those as well. So SSI and Medicaid are related. Kids and adults who receive any amount of SSI automatically receive Medicaid. They shouldn't need to apply. Keep in mind, SSI and SSDI are two different Social Security benefits. Only if someone qualifies for SSI will they automatically receive Medicaid. People who maybe lose SSI and then lose Medicaid in an SSI category should be eligible for another category, and the county should be reviewing individuals who maybe fall into that scenario before they're terminating them.
And Catherine, I imagine most folks on listening to us today know this, but in case not, and we get in the habit of the acronyms, SSI is Supplemental Security Income. SSDI is Social Security Disability Insurance. So they are both Social Security income benefits, but people can qualify for those in different ways. And if people have questions about that, we can kind of touch on that. But I think, again, for Medicaid eligibility purposes, what's important to know is that distinction. And sometimes people will just say, I get Social Security, or when we often talk to clients that they're not necessarily even sure. I get a check from Social Security. They don't necessarily know, is it Social Security Disability? Is it SSI? Is it Social Security Retirement? But again, in terms of Medicaid, it's the SSI, the Supplemental Security Income, that should always equal Medicaid.
And so then we'll now talking a little bit about Medicaid for seniors. This is often known as Healthy Horizons, the category for people 65 years and older, or they are disabled. They are at or below 100% of the federal poverty level. So as you'll see in 2023, for a household of one, that's $1,215 a month. And this category, unlike MAGI, does have a resource limit. So for a single individual, it's $2,000. For a household of two, the resource limit is $3,000. Resources are generally excludes a primary vehicle and home. Normally counted are any cash, stocks, bonds, retirement accounts, so Roth IRAs, 401ks, things like that.
And Catherine, and if I can just add, and this is now where we go back to that earlier question, is are wages counted differently than, say, unemployment or workers' compensation? Now it is. This is where the income counting rules are different for Medicaid eligibility than they are for the MAGI categories, the previous categories that we talked about. So, now we're looking at wages differently than difference between earned income and unearned income. And Catherine, I apologize because I don't have our PowerPoint memorized. So we may get into some details of this. But if not, we certainly can explain this further. I feel like I've been working on too many trainings at the same time and forget what I put in where.
Yeah. And similarly for Medicaid for people with disabilities, so considered healthy horizons, just if they're under 65, disabled either by receiving Social Security disability or if they have medical documentation of health or disabling condition. They can have a provider complete a health sustaining medication form or employability assessment form that's submitted to the county as they're being reviewed for Medicaid to determine disability if they're under 65. And then this last category is a little bit lesser known, but this is the breast and cervical cancer prevention treatment. It requires a diagnosis of breast or cervical cancer. Someone needs to be under age 65 and they need to be uninsured. So they can have no creditable coverage, no employer-based coverage, no commercial coverage, no Medicare, nothing. So for that reason, there's no income limit and there is no resource limit. They just cannot have any other form of insurance, and they need to have a diagnosis of breast or cervical cancer. Yep. Any questions, Dana?
Yes, we have some that came in during this section. First, I do want to note there have been a few questions about the slides. I will be circulating the slides after the presentation along with the recording and the handouts. So the first question is, does a child's receipt of SSI count towards the income limit? And I think that question could be asked, does it count for the adult and does it count for the child? But we have not gotten to the child section yet.
Yeah, so for generally speaking, yes, a child's SSI does count towards their income. For Medicaid's for PH95, if a child is required to apply for SSI, but they don't have to be granted SSI to have PH95, but in MAGI, yes, the child's SSI income is counted.
This person says, I was applying for PH95 for a child and they made me prove the parents' immigration documents. Does that seem right?
No.
No, they're not. People should not need to have proof of immigration status.
Not for a parent.
Especially, yeah, not for the parent for a child applying for a PH95.
Okay. All right. So if that person is having that happen and if there's a denial, of course, they should reach out to our helpline, which I put in the chat. Do special health care needs in these eligibility categories include mental health, and do they include substance use needs?
Yes.
Janice, I don't know if you can answer. Maybe that one.
Yeah, Janice, you're the expert on this piece.
Mental health for certain, and the county assistance office, the Medicaid system, is to defer to Social Security standards in terms of, definition, criteria for an adult with a disability or a child. And there are two different set of standards, understandably, in terms of Social Security rules. So Social Security does view mental health conditions as potentially disabling. Generally, they don't view substance use disorder as disabling. And so those are the rules that Medicaid should use as well. But Medicaid generally, at least in our experience, doesn't, seem to follow kind of to the letter of the law, the way Social Security might in making a determination of, yes, somebody's disabled or they're not. And so I think in the case of people with substance use disorder, they certainly could be determined disabled for purposes of Medicaid eligibility. If they're not otherwise eligible, keeping in mind like the 65 and older category or the MAGI categories for adults 19 to 64. Folks might be eligible simply based on household size, household income, so that a health condition or not doesn't factor into their eligibility.
Thank you, Janice. If someone gets SSI and Medicaid, but then moves to a different state, do they need to apply for Medicaid in the new state, or does it transfer?
It should transfer. Big emphasis on should. I think maybe prior to moving, establishing where the county assistance office is in their area, reaching out to them about that, and also making sure that the current county knows that they'll be transferring is very helpful. I think sometimes there are a lot of issues when people move states with their SSI and Medicaid eligibility, but generally speaking, they should not have to reapply. It should be automatic.
Right. But I think, yeah, as Catherine said, we would not say we do not have expertise around Medicaid in other states.
Yeah.
Thank you both. For Healthy Horizons, do they count the income of the household or the individual? For example, a grandmother living with her adult child. Will all of the adult child's income count towards Healthy Horizons?
No, Healthy Horizons is the applicant. If there's a child, a dependent child under 21 in the household, their resources are not counted and income can be counted slightly differently, but no, it should just be the Healthy Horizons applicant. If they're married, the income of the spouse counts as well.
Okay, thank you. If someone, I just read that question. And another question about household makeup. So what about a household of 2 but not married? I think the question there is whether they would be considered a household for these disability related categories.
If for non-MAGI categories, no. For a MAGI category, it's based on tax filing status as well. So depending on how they file taxes.
Okay. Thank you, Catherine. We have no more questions right now.
Okay. I will turn it over then to Janice to talk about medical assistance for workers with disabilities.
All right. Let's see. Thank you, Catherine. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for being with us, starting your day with all this information. So we're gonna talk a bit about medical assistance for workers with disabilities. Again, this is another non-MAGI category. So income counting rules, household counting rules for this category, like Healthy Horizons, is different than the MAGI counting rules. Very different, actually. Okay. So just some basics for folks maybe not familiar. MAUD is a category of medical assistance, and people sometimes get confused about that. They'll say, I don't, clients might say to us, I don't have Medicaid, I have MAUD. Well, MAUD is Medicaid. It's just like a whole lot of other categories, many of which Catherine just went over. It's just a possible way to qualify for medical assistance. And it's a category used when somebody doesn't fit into one of the other categories. So as the name implies, medical assistance for workers with disabilities, people have to be both working and disabled to be eligible for MAUD. But if they're eligible, then they get the full Medicaid benefit package that a pregnant woman on Medicaid would get, or a senior 65 and older on Medicaid would get. So nothing different in terms of what MAUD covers. It's just another way to get Medicaid. Like most other categories, people can have Medicaid under MAUD as their only insurance, or they could have other insurance. So it could be their secondary insurance. People might have Medicare in addition to MAUD. And unlike every other category of Medicaid, MAUD and the new MAUD for workers with job success that we're going to touch on does require the person to pay a monthly premium. And we're going to talk a bit about that. So MAUD, criteria for MAUD, the person has to be between the ages of 16 and 64. Once somebody turns 65, they are no longer, if they're in MAUD, they're going to age out of MAUD at 65. That is no longer an eligible category for somebody once they hit 65. To be, meet the disability part of the MAUD criteria, somebody's either receiving Social Security disability, SSDI, then they've automatically kind of checked that box. They are determined disabled. If not, somebody can show that they're disabled in the ways Catherine talked about earlier, by having, medical records or a letter, of documentation from a doctor, their diagnosis, the course of treatment, medications they take, or a provider can fill out the health sustaining medication form, the employability assessment form, whatever, that they can perhaps most easily access to document their health condition or their disability if they're not already receiving SSDI. And unlike Healthy Horizons category, where people can, and they are generally, if somebody's not on Social Security disability and trying to get Medicaid as an adult under the Healthy Horizons category, the county assistance office, Medicaid, can require them to apply for Social Security disability. That is not true in the MAUD category. So if they're not getting SSDI, they need to document and provide documentation of what their health or medical condition is, but the county assistance office cannot require them in order to keep their Medicaid to apply for SSDI. The person has to be doing some type of paid work, again, as the name implies, workers with disabilities. They have to meet both income and resource limit, because this category, unlike the MAGI categories, has a resource limit in addition to the income. And then, as I said, there's a monthly premium. That premium is 5% of the individual's countable income. So when a person is married, the spouse's income is counted and the spouse's resources are counted in determining eligibility. But once somebody's found eligible for MAUD, their monthly premium is based only on their income, not on their spouses if they're married. So in order to meet the criteria of working, there's no minimum number of hours, a week or a month that somebody has to be working. But they need to be working monthly. There's not any minimum, earnings that they have to meet. But when we work with folks that are, trying to get on MAUD, and aren't currently working, looking to see if there's something we can do, we typically advise people, if it's informal work, to try to have minimum wage. It's really not going to fly if you say my neighbor's paying me 50 cents a month to do such and such. So the work can be formal or informal, meaning formal, meaning, it's a job with a paycheck kind of thing, or a 1099. And, I have proof of, my work and my income through a pay stub or some, verification from my employer. The informal work could be doing something for a friend, a neighbor, a relative, a parent. it could be any number of people that somebody could be doing some type of work that they're getting paid for. And so somebody in terms of providing documentation of their earnings, typical job, you have a pay stub, you have some type of, you have whatever verification from your employer, that's what you provide. If, you're doing that more informal work for the neighbor, friend, relative, then you're asking for that person to, just please put in writing. Yes, I, Janice Minor, am employing my neighbor, Catherine Arands. She is, providing childcare for my kids once a week. I pay her $10 an hour. Here's my name, here's my address, here's my phone number. And that's the verification Catherine would need if she's doing some type of informal work for me. So the MAUD income limits are much higher than every other category of medical assistance, which is why this can be really helpful for people that are otherwise going to perhaps be denied Medicaid. So you see, and with MAUD, unlike other categories of Medicaid, you're either a household of one because you're single, or you're a household of two because you're married. There is no such thing as, a household of 3 or 4, whether I have kids or not. It's simply tied to I'm single or I'm married. And so you see those income limits. There are significant earned income disregards with MAUD. So it very much matters, what's the source of your income, because there are just very nominal disregards if, let's say most of your income is Social Security disability, all but $20 of that is going to be counted. Unlike your earned income, where less than half of that will be counted in determining your eligibility. And again, as I said earlier, only the applicant's income is used to determine the monthly premium. And again, based on countable income, not their actual gross income. And there's also a new category of MAUD, MAUD for workers with job success. This category has actually been in effect since January of 22, though many people who would have been eligible weren't getting MAUD under this category because of the Medicaid continuous coverage provisions tied to the public health emergency and the pandemic. But there are certainly, more people now, especially come the end of the week, right, April 1st, where people are going to be able to be terminated from Medicaid again as they were before. So in order to be eligible for MAUD under the new workers with job success category, somebody has to be on MAUD first for 12 consecutive months. And then after those 12 consecutive months or more, if the person's income limit exceeds the MAUD limit, the 250% of federal poverty, their income can be up to 600% of the federal poverty level and be eligible under this new MAUD workers with job success category. The resource limit for MAUD is $10,000. To move from MAUD to the workers with job success category, initially, that person's resources still has to be under the $10,000. But then once they're approved, because now their income's over the MAUD limit, they're over that 250% of poverty, but under the 600%, which, that's a big gap in there. Then they're moved into the MAUD with workers with job success category. Then there's no resource limit. So now people aren't, they're earning more, they have more potential perhaps to save, invest in retirement accounts, just have a nest egg. Now, once they've moved over into that category, the workers with job success category, there's no resource limit. So this is a huge benefit for people with health conditions, disabilities, that certainly impact their life, but isn't necessarily impacting their ability to work and earn a good living. And then the premium for the workers with job success category, unlike MAUD at 5%, is at 7.5%. And again, of the person's countable income.
Janice, before you move on to the waiver slide, we have a handful of questions about MAUD. Is it okay
Sure.
to read them now?
Absolutely.
All right, thank you. The first question is for MAUD, will people under 65 with a disability have to file for SSD or SSI again?
With MAUD?
Yes, this came in during the MAUD.
Okay.
Question.
Yeah, no, there's a distinction between the MAUD category and the Healthy Horizons category. So if somebody's applying for Medicaid and they're being looked at under the Healthy Horizons category by the County Assistance Office, and they've indicated that they have a health condition or disability, but aren't currently, not currently receiving SSI or SSDI, then the rules dictate that that person is required to apply for Social Security disability. That is not true with MAUD. So even though MAUD is workers with disability, the person, if not receiving SSDI, is going to have to provide that medical documentation of their health condition or disability, that the County Assistance Office should not be requiring them to apply for SSDI as a condition to maintain their Medicaid eligibility. So different roles for those two different categories.
Thank you, Janice. Another question about establishing disability for MAUD. If Social Security determines that an individual is no longer disabled and cuts off their SSDI due to employment earnings, can that individual still be considered disabled for MAUD purposes? And would that individual need to provide documentation of ongoing disability or chronic health condition?
The person probably would have to provide documentation, but the rules for Social Security disability eligibility are tied to people's ability to earn, and that's different than Medicaid. So, people can lose Social Security disability, that check, but still remain disabled. But for Social Security purposes, they're looking at it based on their earnings, their ability to work and have substantial gainful employment. So, if I'm somebody who's disabled, have a physical disability, let's say, cerebral palsy, I could lose my Social Security disability because I'm working with my condition, but I'm working, have substantial gainful employment, so I lose that SSDI. But no, that does not mean I'm going to lose, my Medicaid. But yes, I would likely have to, provide, verification of my health condition in order to keep Medicaid.
Thanks, Janice. Can a full-time student who is also working qualify for MAUD?
Yes, if they meet all the other criteria. They're 16 to 64. They have, a disability or, a significant health condition that is, able to be documented, medical documentation, letter from the doctor, et cetera. And they're otherwise, under the resource limit, under the income limit. Yes.
Okay, thank you. A couple of questions about financial eligibility for MAUD. First is, for MAUD, is the Medicare Part B premium counted as income for eligibility? And I think this may mean, is there an income deduction for paying the Part B premium?
Yeah, no, it is counted. So the person's gross income, and let's say again, that person's on Social Security disability insurance with Medicare, and they're paying, whether they're paying their own Part B premium or not, Social Security or Medicaid, I'm sorry, for counting income is starting with their gross Social Security. So if that Part B premium's coming out of their check, their Social Security check, before they ever see that money, for purposes of how income gets counted for Medicaid, they're putting that Part B premium back in. They're looking at what that person's gross Social Security disability is, subtracting just a standard $20 disregard, and then counting the remainder of that gross for MAUD. And that's true for Healthy Horizons as well.
Okay, thank you, Janice. This question may be a little beyond the scope, but perhaps you could just tee it up and folks could get more information offline. But does a special needs trust protect assets for purposes of the $10,000 MAUD resource limit?
If the trust is set up in consistent with the rules of Medicaid, and and I think Dana prefaced this well, that this is certainly not off the top of our head, our expertise. So it would just it has to meet the criteria of Medicaid of what is a special needs trust. And when folks call us and might be looking to do that, like for themselves or somebody, set up a special needs trust, that isn't something we help people with. And we would refer them to typically a certified elder law attorney, whether the person was elder or not, because it's their expertise. An ABLE account, which is a type of special needs trust, Pennsylvania ABLE account, is definitely not counted as a resource for the resource limit for Healthy Horizons or MAUD.
Okay, thank you. And the last question we got about MAUD is about workers with job success, excuse me. It's a new program, we're still learning the name. Is this something the client has to pursue, or are workers in MAUD being assessed proactively for workers with job success?
That's a great question, and one, quite honestly, we don't, in practice in particular, we don't know the answer to yet, because the workers at the county assistance office have not really, it's a very new program, effective January 2022, but because of the public health emergency, anybody who was on MAUD, whose income went up over that 250% of federal poverty, was still not terminated from Medicaid. So, how should this work? I mean, and this is true for all categories of Medicaid. The rules say when somebody's on Medicaid, as we're letting people know now, that they're on Medicaid in a certain category. People often don't know that. It's kind of a behind the scenes thing, but they're on Medicaid in a certain category, like a pregnant woman. Well, now she's not pregnant anymore. At some point, the baby's born, that she's no longer pregnant. That pregnant woman should not be knocked off of Medicaid before getting reviewed under every other category. Do we think that always happens? Unfortunately, no. So, people on MAUD whose income have had MAUD 12 consecutive months or more, now their income, the resources are still under the required 10,000, but their income has now exceeded the 250% of federal poverty, then yes, they should be getting reviewed for the MAUD for workers with job success category before they should then, get a termination notice saying, you're over the income limit for Medicaid under MAUD, you're no longer eligible. But time will tell, because the counties have not had to do this yet.
I'm just gonna shift gears a bit. We do have, oh, you know what, I'm gonna stick with these. We're getting more questions as I'm reading them for MAUD and workers with job success. So let me ask those and then I'm gonna move on. We have some questions about the breast cancer program as well. For MAUD, if a person who is applying for MAUD is not on Social Security disability, the state has to make their own determination. How long does that take?
Yeah, that's a good question. Ideally, they should still do it under 30 days, and it's not the caseworkers doing that. The county assistance office has a medical review team. They are clinicians that are reviewing that criteria. So ideally, they should do it under the 30 days. It could take longer, in which case somebody could ask to be determined, especially if they're really in need of insurance and don't have any, or they have Medicare that doesn't cover 100%. They can ask to be determined presumptively eligible for MAUD by, having a doctor complete something like the health sustaining medication form. And that form says, Janice has major depression. She takes 2 medications for her. I'm treating her for such and such. If for some reason that wasn't sufficient for the medical review team, I can still, proactively, unfortunately, people typically would have to ask, well, based on what my doctor did submit, the medical review team is asking for more information, but based on what the doctors did submit, with that health sustaining medication form, I'd like to be determined presumptively eligible for MAUD or for Healthy Horizons. While, I work on perhaps getting more documentation they may have asked for, and or the medical review team has more time to review my case.
Okay, thank you, Janice. Another question about workers with job success. What can someone do if they were not moved to MAUD during the pandemic, working at least 12 months? Do they have to maintain their job 12 months starting April 1st?
Great question. No, they should not. But again, this is likely going to require some advocacy. And, somebody who perhaps gets terminated after they have their review, because the state now has begun, they've been doing the renewals, but now the renewals, the state's going to be able to act on effective April 1. So, if somebody gets terminated because they're over the MAUD limit, but in fact would have been on MAUD, had there not been a public health emergency, then, then there should be a retroactive look at that, so that, the person then could, without ever technically being, in the MAUD category, be able to be moved to the MAUD workers with job success. But again, I would not at all expect that to happen without some advocacy. And those would be very good cases to send to us.
Okay, thank you, Janice. That's all for the MAUD questions. I just want to get to one about the breast and cervical cancer prevention and treatment program. For patients that have this coverage, the breast and cervical cancer program, who get sick with other problems like cardiac issues, does it cover those services as well?
Yes, when somebody's eligible for medical assistance under the breast and cervical cancer prevention treatment program, they have full Medicaid coverage. They have the full adult, if they're 21 or older, they have the full adult benefit package.
Okay. And then just quickly, I'm going to just answer this and then I'll elaborate in the chat. For the breast cancer program, does it have a legal immigration criteria? And the answer is yes. You have to be a U.S. citizen or a qualified immigrant, and we're going to get to what qualified means later on in the presentation, and I'll put this in the chat as well. And that's all we have right now for questions. Thank you both so much.
Sure. Okay. Now we want to talk a bit about how somebody might be eligible for Medicaid because they're eligible for home and HCBS, home and community-based services, what people often refer to as waivers or waiver programs. So in order for somebody to be Medicaid eligible under this category, they have to meet the clinical eligibility criteria. And that clinical criteria is different for the different waiver programs. Pennsylvania has several home and community-based waiver programs, 3 for people with intellectual disabilities, 1 for people with physical developmental disabilities, that's the OPRA waiver, the Community Health Choices waiver for people who are determined nursing facility clinically eligible, the autism waiver, people needing to have an autism diagnosis, so that when we say they have to be clinically eligible, that can vary a lot depending on their health conditions and what waiver they're trying to be determined eligible for. No matter the waiver, the income limit and the resource limit rules are the same. The income limit for waivers for 2023 for an individual, $2,742 a month. And unlike other categories of Medicaid, only the income of the applicant is counted in determining income eligibility for the home and community-based waiver programs. So even if the person is married, spouse's income isn't counted. But there's also a resource limit. The resource limit is $8,000. Spouse's resources are counted in determining eligibility for the applicant for any of the home and community-based waiver programs. But it's not as simple as, well, if I'm single, it's 8,000. If I'm married, it doubles to 16. It's much more complicated than that. There are spousal empowerment rules that apply. And again, a good situation to refer people to us if they're trying to figure out, might this individual who's applying for the home and community-based waiver, who's has her and the spouse together have $30,000 in resources. Are they going to be eligible? Possibly, yes. And then again, under the waiver program, the resources, if the applicant has a dependent child under the age of 21, their dependent child under the age of 21, then resources are not counted under this category. So when people are determined income and clinically eligible for any one of Pennsylvania's home and community-based waiver programs, they get access to a whole list of services that vary from waiver program to waiver program in terms of the waiver services, and then additionally get full Medicaid. And so that's why we kind of include this in, possible ways for people to qualify for Medicaid, because this doesn't just then give somebody, these are Medicaid waiver programs. So it gives them whatever, services are available under the given waiver and full medical assistance coverage for physical and behavioral health care. Again, same benefit package any other adult on Medicaid would get. Okay. I know we just did the questions. Deanna, I don't know if anything else popped in.
There's a few more that we'll get to at the end if we have time, but nothing about the categories you just did. Okay, great. Okay. And so now we want to touch on Medicaid for immigrants. And I think we have a list at the end of a couple of upcoming webinars. One is not on immigrants, but I think that's in the works.
So stay tuned, folks, because this in fact is a webinar unto itself. So can somebody who's an immigrant be eligible for Medicaid? It's a depends for sure, and depends on a lot of factors. So, and depending on who that immigrant is, there are even different standards for whether or not somebody could be eligible. So there's what's considered lawfully present immigrants. That standard is applied to, you know, children, pregnant women, some adults, and then there's a higher bar, so to speak, to be eligible for Medicaid. And that, you know, that's termed the qualified immigrant status. And so for people that don't meet that criteria of lawfully present, like a pregnant woman or kids, then likely have to meet the qualified immigrant status. And for many of those folks, they have to be not only a qualified immigrant, but a qualified immigrant for 5 years in the country before they could potentially be eligible for Medicaid. So for example, somebody who's, you know, an LPR, legal permanent resident, you know, a green card holder who isn't otherwise a pregnant woman, you know, or a child, or doesn't fit, you know, other potential situations, then that person is possibly having to wait 5 years, what's often referred to as the 5-year bar, before they're going to be eligible for Medicaid. And typically, and that's the standard for most adults. So, and again, the 5-year bar is that waiting period that runs from the date the person obtains that quote unquote qualified status. So again, kind of the easy example is, you know, somebody who has been determined a legal permanent resident and has, you know, is now in this country with a green card. You know, when did they get that green card? Was it a year ago? Was it 4 years ago? You know, if there's somebody that doesn't fit the lawfully present category, then we're looking at, again, waiting for that 5-year bar. There are, again, some people that are not subject to the 5-year bar. And, you know, these are just some, you know, examples we've already talked about, like people who don't have to be in the qualified status, who can just be considered lawfully present, like kids under the age of 21 and pregnant women. But then there are also folks who, you know, if they're here in a certain refugee status or an asylee status, and then the reference at the bottom, the MAEH, that's the link to the Medical Assistance Eligibility Handbook. And that specific section talks more about, you know, other people who may not be subject to the 5-year bar. Okay. And so when we talk about the, you know, the difference between, you know, somebody who's lawfully present versus somebody who has to be in a qualified status, you know, somebody who's, you know, a qualified, you know, who's a non-citizen, you know, a non-citizen perhaps in a temporary resident status, or, you know, currently under a temporary protected status. And again, those are just some examples. The Medical Assistance Eligibility Handbook has, you know, a much more comprehensive list of immigrants that could be, you know, determined for purposes of Medicaid eligibility's sake, lawfully present. And again, we hope to do a whole webinar on this, but you know, in the meantime, people have questions, or for themselves or somebody that they're working with, trying to help figure out, you know, is this person who's not a US citizen, who's not, here in a qualified status for 5 years or more, are they in fact still potentially eligible for Medicaid? Absolutely refer those folks to us and let us get into the weeds, as is often required, to help figure out, whether or not they're eligible, or figure out if they applied and were denied. Were they appropriately denied? And if not, let us help you figure that out. And then the other way that an immigrant is potentially eligible for Medicaid when they're not already eligible because they've not, met the qualified status with the 5-year bar, or they're not otherwise lawfully present. Somebody could be eligible still as an undocumented immigrant, or one documented without meeting that other criteria, if they have what's considered emergency medical condition. That emergency medical condition has to be documented. It really has to be documented pretty specifically and clearly. And again, a good opportunity to call us if medical providers are trying to figure this out. That emergency medical condition needs to be clearly stated, what the course of treatment is needed for that emergency medical condition, and what's expected length of time that treatment would entail. So it's specific and detailed, and otherwise people really could be denied Medicaid under the emergency medical condition category. Labor and delivery is considered emergency medical condition. Typically, pregnancy is not. A high-risk pregnancy could be, but again, that would require the help of a treating medical provider, to determine that. But labor and delivery should always be considered emergency medical condition, and therefore that person, applying should be determined Medicaid eligible under this category. And I think I kind of touched on some of this, and just in terms of definition, what is an emergency medical condition? It is definitely not limited to things like, I was hurt so badly, I went to the emergency room and then required surgery. That example often would be perhaps an emergency medical condition, and one that can be retroactively applied for Medicaid, but it's certainly not, limited to like emergency room kinds of things. So, and again, it's with the medical documentation indicating patient's health, is in serious jeopardy, serious impairment to a bodily function. That could be a limb, that could be an organ, and serious dysfunction of a bodily organ or part. And again, it's really helpful when medical providers, doctors, whoever it may be, is using some of this specific language to describe their patient's emergency medical condition. We're going to pause here.
Janice, I think we have a handful of questions about the immigration stuff, which I think is expected. It's very complex. Today, we're not going to have time to delve into these. I think what Janice said is correct. Look out for future webinar announcements, and we will try to host a session that's dedicated solely to talking about the immigration Medicaid eligibility.
Absolutely. And as I said, in the meantime, if the question in particular is coming from somebody who's really needs to know this sooner than later for themselves, or somebody that they're working with, then, please reach out. Please contact us. You don't need to wait for the webinar. If, you or somebody you're currently working with is perhaps in the process of applying or were denied, contact us now. Okay, so let's just talk a bit about how to apply for Medicaid. Medicaid renewals that again are especially important to be keying into now because of the end of the Medicaid continuous coverage. People can apply for Medicaid on the state's Compass website. They can apply by phone. They can apply with a paper application with the rules supposed to be, any form is a good form. In other words, there's a mod application, but people, do not have to complete the actual mod application if they're applying for Medicaid under that category. People can apply in person at the county assistance office, and people can apply anytime, meaning there's no such thing as an open enrollment period for Medicaid like there is for Medicare, or there often is for people who have insurance through their job. People can apply for Medicaid at any point in the year. People applying by phone, basically there is somebody within the Department of Human Services that is helping somebody complete the whole Medicaid application. So really helpful if people are applying by phone that, they have some of the, if they don't have it at their fingertips, they have some of that information in front of them. Income, their bank account number, all those things that are a part of the application. It's really helpful. So security number, of course, to kind of have some of that stuff at your fingertips. Otherwise, you're going to get through that phone application and not be able to answer questions. And then it's not, you're going to have to circle back to complete the application. If somebody is denied Medicaid, they have a right to appeal. They have a right first to a written decision. That written decision should tell them why they've been denied. It should not just say over income. It should say your income was determined to be such and such, and the income limit is such and such, and then provide people with their, the right to appeal. The only way to appeal a denial of Medicaid is through what's called a fair hearing. If somebody has Medicaid and then it's been terminated, they have a renewal perhaps, and now based on the renewal information, the county assistance office has determined the person is no longer eligible. They have 30 days to appeal from the date on the denial notice. But if they appeal within 15 days, then they're eligible for the Medicaid to continue, through the appeal process. If people are denied or terminated, especially in cases of the county had the information wrong, or you're denied because the process required, documentation of your income and you didn't provide that, then you still can have the opportunity to provide that if it's within 60 days of that denial notice. So somebody gets that denial notice or even a termination notice, and the termination is because, and the notice should say, you did not provide the requested documentation. Circle back, figure out if you don't know what that requested documentation was. Ask the county assistance office to have your application reconsidered because tomorrow you're going to hand deliver that, or you're going to put it in the mail. And they should then, it should be reconsidered. The county assistance office should not say, oh, sorry, you're denied, you have to start all over again. Okay. Renewing Medicaid eligibility. And again, we already had the webinar on this, correct? I think that webinar has already happened and it was recorded, so people can access that webinar. But again, now more than ever, paying attention to Medicaid renewals is really important. It has been 3 years of people being continued on Medicaid for the most part, whether or not they completed the renewal, whether or not they provided any documentation of income, et cetera, whether or not they continued to be eligible. So Now the state's going to spend the next 12 months, really looking at everybody, but, there's 1 million people at least that have had Medicaid continue that may or may not still be eligible. So it's important that people focus on, making sure they complete the renewal. Really important, people notify the county assistance office or the customer service center if they've had any changes, especially changes in address, changes in phone number. These renewal packets are not going to get to people if they've moved and have not notified the county assistance office. Even if they had Social Security and they notified Social Security and they're getting their Social Security benefit and all's fine there, that's a separate system. If they have not notified the county assistance office, they're not going to get that renewal packet. And the general rule is any change in income, resources, household, et cetera, address, the requirement is that the Medicaid recipient provide that information to the county assistance office by the 10th day of the month after that change occurred. People can do the renewal on Compass. People who have a Compass account can look on the Compass account to see, well, when is my renewal? Like, I don't remember. I think maybe it was August or September, or, if you look on your Compass account, it will let people know when your renewal is due, and help people to, kind of key into, it may not be exactly in September, but, I'd start looking from July and August on. Because if people do not complete the renewals, back to the rules that always existed pre-pandemic, even if they're still eligible, they're going to be terminated for Medicaid. Okay. And just some tips, both for individuals as well as folks working with them that might have the ability to, to be helpful, whether applying or renewing, keep copy of it when you can, keep a copy of information submitted, even, documented phone calls. Never send originals of anything, ideally, to the county assistance office. Even if, a doctor completes something like a health sustaining medication form, it ideally asks the doctor's office to make a copy, or make a copy when you can before you turn that only copy over to the county assistance office. If people are providing verification, submitting pay stubs, whatever it might be, it helps if there's a place on there to, put your case record number if you have one because you've already had Medicaid, or put your Social Security number. That way things don't get separated and now there's something on somebody's desk somewhere that doesn't necessarily have a name on it, and now we don't know, what case this goes to. People can also add a representative to their case file with Medicaid. So if, I want, in addition to me getting any contact information, letters, phone calls, et cetera, from the county assistance office, I also want my brother to get that information. I can request that and provide my brother's contact information so that every time I get whatever I get from the county assistance office, my brother gets that as well, because he's, somebody who's going to help me stay, on top of this. Okay, pausing for questions.
Sorry, was missing my mute button. I've been answering a few questions in the Q&A just to move us along, but we don't have any that are urgent for the group right now. Thanks, Janice.
Okay, great. Right, so we just want to touch on some Medicaid categories. CHIP is the Children's Health Insurance Program. CHIP is for kids who are over income for Medicaid, or kids who don't qualify under that PH95 kids with disability category. Kids have to be uninsured to be eligible for CHIP. So they can't be eligible for Medicaid. Kids who are eligible for Medicaid get Medicaid. Kids who are eligible for CHIP get CHIP. Unfortunately, like parents don't get to choose. So if a household income size goes up or down, or that impacts, CHIP to Medicaid or Medicaid to CHIP, they get whichever they are determined eligible for based on household size, household income. And there is free CHIP. There's also CHIP that is low cost, where families do pay a premium, but it's all tied to income and household size. And then people actually can pay the full cost for CHIP. Okay. And then this is just a quick chart. Obviously, it's just this chart just goes up to a household of 4. Obviously, the income limits go up. CHIP is not limited to households of 4. This is just how the information we provided. So those income limits for household of 2, 3, and 4 for free CHIP and for low cost CHIP. No resources counted for CHIP. CHIP uses the same, for eligibility determination, uses the modified adjusted gross income rules for counting income and counting household. So same rules as for kids on Medicaid, pregnant women, adults not on Medicare. And then we just wanted to touch on Penny, which is Pennsylvania's state-based marketplace. It is what's, as a result of the Affordable Care Act, what some people refer to as Obamacare. Some states operate their own marketplace, some don't. Pennsylvania does. So people who are over income for Medicaid may be eligible for insurance through Penny, through our state's marketplace. And depending on their income, they could also be eligible for subsidized premiums. So for, a lot of help depending on their income for the cost of the particular insurance that they're looking for. People generally do need to be ineligible for Medicaid in order to get help with the cost of insurance through Penny. People have to be lawfully present immigrant and open to lawfully present immigrants who are ineligible for Medicaid. So again, don't have to quite meet that higher bar of a qualified immigrant. But if they're lawfully present and ineligible for Medicaid, they could get insurance through Penny, including help with the premiums. A person needs to enroll within 120 days of losing Medicaid in order to enroll in Penny. Otherwise, Penny's, it can be limited to open enrollment periods, which happen towards the end of the year. And households with income with less than 150% of federal poverty can apply to Penny at any time for now, having to do with the public health emergency. So where do folks call for help? All Medicaid related issues, the customer service center with the Department of Human Services. People can also contact their county assistance office. County assistance office also have people in supervisory roles there that are called medical assistance ombudsman, whose specialty is to be in Medicaid in particular versus food stamps or LIHEAP. There are managers, there's obviously supervisors for workers. So, if people are not getting to a caseworker or thinking caseworkers not giving them right information, they can try to reach out to other folks within the county assistance office. The PA Medi program, which many might have known as a prize, it's changed its name in the last couple of years. PA Medi is available to provide free Medicare counseling for people. So people needing help with Medicare, understanding Medicare, choosing a Medicare Advantage plan, understanding other kinds of supplements like Medigap policies. That's the expertise of the PA-MEDI program. And then, of course, you have the Pennsylvania Health Law Project helpline listed there as well.
Right, thanks, Janice. We have a few questions for you. And again, folks should check the chat because I have been answering some of them there as well. The first question, well, let's go on the application questions first. If a person receives SSI and therefore automatically gets Medicaid or medical assistance, will they receive a renewal application due to the unwinding?
They should not. They should not, to my knowledge. And if either of you know otherwise, yeah, I think they should not.
Yeah, I think that's correct, Janice. I think just as they don't renew annually otherwise, it's just all handled through the Social Security system, communicating with the state. They shouldn't have a renewal coming due, just like they wouldn't any other time.
Right.
Okay. Another question about the application. I did answer this and put the phone number in the chat, but I wanted folks to hear this for everyone's benefit. How does someone get their case record number so that they can set up a Compass account? So I put the customer service center number in the chat. I think the best bet for this person would be to call the customer service center. It's a statewide helpline that DHS operates. And usually with some identifying information like name, date of birth, social security number, they can look up the account. The individual person has to call themselves, or if someone else is helping them call, they have to be on the line. They won't provide the information unless it's directly to the individual or their representative, as Janice mentioned, if they've designated one on file.
Right, right. And if somebody has like an old notice, their case record number should be on that notice.
Yes, that's a good point too. Okay, and the last question does not have to do with this application section. It's from earlier in the training. I just wanted to flag it so that everyone hears it. And I also encourage this person to reach out to our helpline. A child is receiving Medicaid, but their parent got a letter stating that the child could be eligible for Social Security disability. The letter states the mother should apply for Social Security disability or the child's Medicaid will be terminated. Is this appropriate, and will the child's Medicaid be at risk?
It is possibly very appropriate if that child's getting Medicaid under the PH95 category. Because applying for Medicaid for a child under PH95, which should always mean the child's otherwise over income for household size, and then that is absolutely a requirement. And it's not, I mean, typically it wouldn't be SSDI, although it could be, it's SSI. Kids are much more likely to be SSI eligible. SSI is tied to household income, household resources. So, it could be, the child might be eligible for SSI, they may not. Fine, then ask Social Security. They're going to screen them first for income and resources. They don't even get into disability if they say, nope, your child's not getting SSI. You're, a household of 3 and the income is 100,000. That's not an SSI eligible child. Okay, great. Social Security, please send me that in writing. Denied because of income, and then provide that to the county assistance office.
How would someone get a hold of the medical assistance ombudsman? Would it be through the local county assistance office?
Yes. And I think we also have a list that I think we can share that list. Does anybody know differently?
No, I think that's okay on this for the folks on this call.
Okay. So yeah, and I think we just got a recent updated one for, and of course, you know, they can change overnight, but we have, I think, the most current list of MA ombudsmen across the state. So yeah, Dana, can you send that to folks?
Yes, I'll put that in the handouts when I circulate after the webinar.
Okay, great.
Right. Okay. I'm looking over a few more questions here. I'll try to get to them, but Janice, I think we can continue with the last couple of slides and then see where we're at toward.
Sure. Yep.
Now.
Yeah, absolutely. So we did want to let people know about upcoming trainings that we're doing that are already scheduled. You see one on appeals, reconsideration, and troubleshooting, you know, coverage denials. That would be especially, I think, helpful perhaps for folks in timely, again, because that Medicaid continuous coverage provision ends April 1st. Looking at MOD and the MOD for with job success, April 20th, and then dual eligibles, those with Medicare and Medicaid, in the Medicare Saving Program, May 17th. So folks can feel free to register for one or all of those. And then just some other ways for folks to connect with us and stay connected. I don't even know what all this stuff is. Dana has to, I know what Facebook is. The little tweet is at the little Twitter. It's so bad. I'm very old.
Thank you,
Instagram is the IN Instagram.
Close, no. So we are on all the social media platforms as PA Health Law. So if you reach out to us through there, you can get timely updates. We put our newsletters out, you know, through those channels too. And then you can scan the QR code at the bottom to actually sign up for our newsletter. So you'll get it in your inbox. But thank you, Janice.
Dana. I said, sure, Dana, I can cover this slide, and clearly never even.
You're doing great. Thank you.
And then contact information for us, for myself and Catherine. Again, our helpline number, that helpline operates Mondays and Wednesdays from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. That is the only time people can leave messages. And then we also put the link on here to our website, lots of materials under the resource library section of our website that hopefully can be helpful to folks. And anybody interested in getting our electronic newsletter that comes out typically once a month can sign up at the link there that Dana provided for us.
And I see we do have a few more questions coming in. Some of them are a little too detailed for this training. So we're going to look at the chat. Certainly anyone who has questions that are pressing can reach out to our helpline that Janice put on the slide here. And we would be happy to discuss, you know, individual, more complicated situations. But that is all for our presentation today. Thank you, Janice, and thank you, Catherine. That was an excellent presentation of very detailed information in the time allotted. So well done. We will look forward to seeing folks on our next webinar, which will take place early in April, and we'll circulate those slides, the recording and the handouts again after. So stay tuned for that in your email. I hope everybody has a great rest of the day, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.